Hello and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who'd like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hello, I'm Tom Dillon, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Helen Leathers. Good morning, Helen. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am wonderfully well. Have you noticed I've started saying your name in a much more fluent way?
Yes.
I don't trip over myself quite as much as I used to.
No, and you can say my surname and my first name together.
Yeah. And I don't call you Heather.
Well done.
It's been a long time since I've done that.
It is, yeah.
I've only ever done it once. But it was in public, wasn't it? It was at a conference.
Yeah. In front of loads of people.
Yeah. People do that to you a lot, though, don't they? Call you Heather.
They do.
Conflating the two names.
Yeah, although it's very strange when once a 3-year-old called me Heather and had no idea about my surname. Very strange. I've had a good morning this morning because I've been collecting books up from around the house.
Good.
Bringing them here.
Just for the record, I've not been leaving books lying around the house. It's not a tidying up after me exercise.
No, I've just been, we've got a couple of different bookshelves and I've just been round and collected together. Not that the listeners are going to see this, although I'm going to put some pictures online, but just so that we've got the books in front of us that I want to talk about today.
Oh, so we're talking about books
We're talking about books today.
Good. We haven't actually discussed what we were talking about. Thank you for sharing.
Well, I love a good
today on the podcast, we are talking about coaching books.
Yes. And I love a good book recommendation, and we're always being asked about books on the different coaching approaches that we train on the Transformational Coaching Diploma. So I thought we could just share some of our best books for our listeners today.
Sounds like a great idea. So what are you reading at the moment?
Actually, I'm reading some fiction at the moment. I've joined a reading group. Book club. I've joined a book club.
That thing.
So I've just finished The House by the Cerulean Sea, and I have also just finished Dark Matter, a ghost story by Michelle Pavey.
Very good. Set
in Antarctica.
Oh.
Yeah, it's good. What about you?
Wonderful.
What are you reading?
Not reading anything at the moment.
Oh?
I've just finished Sally Rooney's, I can't remember what it's called. It's about chess.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. Yeah, I know I was waiting for the kind of disaster to come, and it didn't, which was nice.
Excellent.
I like a Hollywood ending. I'm a romantic at heart. I don't like it when it all goes horribly wrong at the end. Spoiler alert. No, that's too much of a spoiler, isn't it? That it doesn't all go horribly wrong.
I think some people would welcome that.
Good. So let's crack on with coaching books. What have we got first?
Well, firstly, just to reassure everyone, we're going to put a list of these books on our show notes. So they're going to be there. You don't have to worry about taking notes. But I thought we could start from the beginning.
So the idea of this is that if you have an interest in coaching and maybe an interest in one particular area of coaching, want some recommendations around that area, then hopefully this podcast will help you to find some books to read.
Yeah, so we'll go through...
Good books to read.
Yes. So we'll go through the different approaches that we've talked about on this podcast, and then we'll pick a book for each one.
Okay, good.
And then I've got some extra books at the end that we can just talk about if we've got time.
Wonderful. Okay, let's start. Where are you going to start?
Well, I was going to start at the beginning. So if you've got just an interest in coaching, if perhaps you are thinking about doing a coach training program, or maybe if you want to go back to basics, I thought we could talk about the book How to Coach by Bob Thomson.
Bob Thomson.
You know Bob.
My old mate. I've known Bob for, how long have I known Bob? 15 years. So Bob is actually my supervisor. So now that's not the reason that we're recommending the book, but he has been around in coaching for a long time. So and has written, I don't know, well, this must be his 10th book on coaching. He's written a lot of coaching books, and that's kind of his latest. I don't know whether it is his latest one, but that as an introduction to coaching, I think it's a great sort of. It says how to coach, and the subtitle is the first steps and beyond. But I think as an introduction to coaching and what is entailed, it's a great place to start.
And Bob was a professor at Warwick University.
Yeah, professor of practice at Warwick Business School, yes.
Excellent.
So, yeah, and, he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
So
that would be the first one as an introduction.
Yeah, just if you've got no idea where to start and no idea what coaching is all about, then I think that's a great place to start. I mean, Bob had a career in industry, so he worked for an energy company, so probably comes at coaching from a more sort of managerial perspective than where we would start. So we are much more of that mix of life coaching and management coaching, organizational coaching. So we're not, Bob probably wouldn't cross over into sort of life coaching in the way that we do.
Yeah. And I remember reading one of his previously called With No Attachment to the Outcome.
Yeah.
Which was, again, a bit of an introductory book. But I mention it because I love the title. And I think it's a really good premise to have when you're coaching as a coach, to have no attachment to the outcome.
Yeah.
Because it's not yours, is it? It's your coachee's.
Yeah.
It's important.
Another one of his was, don't do something, just sit there.
Oh.
Because that's what coaching is all about. It's actually sitting and thinking about stuff rather than rushing off to do something.
Yeah. So just to be clear, we're not saying go out and buy all of these books. No. But if you're looking for a beginner's book on coaching or a foundational book on coaching, I think How to Coach is a good one.
It is, yeah. Good. What's next?
So I was looking for something around person-centered coaching. And I think with our course, with our students, we recommend one of Nancy Kline's books.
Time to Think.
I couldn't find it, so I think it's one you've got on your Kindle.
It is on my Kindle. Actually, I think it might be on iBooks.
Okay.
That was a thing. It's still on iBooks, but I now use a Kindle.
So Time to Think,
yes.
Nancy Kline.
Yes.
It's all about listening, isn't it?
Not all about listening. Some of it is about asking incisive questions. So for people that aren't familiar with Nancy Kline's work, she was a Quaker by background, so very used to silence. So her coaching approach is very much around holding that space for people and sitting there whilst they think. And she has this process called Time to Think. And it is a bit of a process. So I think the book's worth a read. I think that idea that we can do good work in the coaching room by sitting and listening rather than thinking that we have to get involved, I think is a great starting point for coaches to flex away from how you would normally be in a conversation.
And how doctors would normally be solving problems.
Yeah.
And
it had a big impression on me when I read it. I did for a while kind of go to that very Nancy Kline kind of use of silence space. And sort of a bit of a mixed reaction. So some people really valued it, other people perhaps less so. But I think I think it's a great place to start. Like I think you have to learn how to hold the space, to be silent, to let someone think. If you don't learn how to do that, then you're just going to keep rushing in and offering solutions and asking the next question and everything else. So about that time, it's probably the longest time I've ever sat in a coaching session where I've not interjected and not had something to say. There's a guy who was an engineer and was thinking about his future career. And career coaching tends to be quite directive, you're quite involved when you
chatty.
Talk about. Yeah. And he talked for an hour without me asking a question, without me playing anything back. I think I grunted at times, just, they know I was still there. But yeah, about an hour. And at the end of it, he said, "That was fantastic. Thank you so much." And that was on the back of me reading Nancy Kline's Time to Think book. So I don't agree with everything that she does. I don't agree with the process that she has for her coaching, but certainly in terms of that, holding that space and not interrupting your clients, and big debate over that of whether you should interrupt or not. But I do buy into her idea that if we interrupt someone's thinking, then we're denying them that opportunity to think to the end of their thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got that interesting person-centered coaching, this is a good book.
I don't think she would necessarily tie herself to the idea of person-centered coaching. She doesn't do playing back particularly, so that's a big part of person-centered. So that's a bit that's missing for me from Nancy Kline's approach, but definitely worth a read. It's quite powerful stuff.
And we've talked about time to think in a previous episode, haven't we? We've gone into that in more detail, but an interesting book. It's not one I've read yet, actually.
Yeah, and it is actually a good read. Yeah.
I will put it on my list. There we go. So moving on to more solution-focused coaching, there is a book called Solution Focused by Bill O'Connell, Steve Palmer and Helen Williams, which, again, is on our further reading list for our students.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put my hand up here and say, I haven't read this one either.
Helen, what are you doing? You're reading too many novels, ghost stories. Come on.
I'm going to come on to the books I have read in a bit. But what are your thoughts on this solution-focused book?
Yeah, I think it's kind of almost like the opposite of, and like quite a few of the books that we're going to recommend are more sort of textbooks. It's kind of a how to do. So they're not books you're necessarily going to sit down and read from cover to cover. It's not a page turner, but it's one of those that you can dip into chapters and go, oh, okay, well, let me look at that bit. Let's think about the miracle magic wand question, and you can. So it's a good reference book in that sense.
Excellent.
And the authors are experts in their field. So
yeah. Yes, I think
I wouldn't buy that one thinking you're going to pick it up and read it cover to cover.
But a dip in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephen Palmer's name comes up a lot in
he's a
coaching
psychologist, so has thoughts on many aspects of coaching.
So this is where I do come into my own, which is the positive psychology books. I have quite a few positive psychology books.
But have you read any of them, Helen?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Yes, I've read nearly all of them. I think I started with Positive Psychology in a Nutshell by Alona Boniwell. And it's a very easy, accessible book. There is, I'm just going to reach across the table. Hold on. It's not effective on a podcast, is it? There is a great book called Positive Psychology Coaching in Practice. Stephen Palmer's name comes up again here.
He gets about a bit, doesn't he?
I know. So it's edited by Susie Green and Stephen Palmer. And this, I think, is really useful because it takes positive psychology and says, how are we going to use that practically in the coaching space? So if people are interested in positive psychology, I think that's a really good book too.
Yeah, although I noticed that it doesn't look as if it's been read. It looks very pristine.
I'm very neat when I read. I prefer, actually, what I call the blue shoe book.
That looks like it's been thumbed through.
This is very well read.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's called the Blue Shoe Book because it's blue and it's got shoes on the cover.
Okay.
So it's by Alona Boniwell and Anita Tenariu. I'm not sure how you pronounce her surname. Hopefully I've got that right. And it's called Positive Psychology, Theory, Research and Applications.
Okay, so that doesn't sound like a coaching book.
No. And that's why I mentioned Positive Psychology Coaching in Practice first, because that is very much about how you can apply it. However, if you start to learn about positive psychology and you're fascinated, as I was by it, this Blue Shoe Book is brilliant because it's really accessible, even though it is actually it's used at master's levels as a textbook, so it's quite academic. It's got lots of research. I know our doctors like lots of research, so they might be interested in that. And it takes all the topics and kind of digs into them, not really, really deeply, but there's interventions for each one that you can explore and use. And hopefully you can read something and then work out how you can incorporate that into your coaching. And I think that's where coaching can be really exciting and really individual to the coach when you take the things that you're interested in and weave it through what you do. There's also in this book some things like scales and measures. So if you're interested in looking at how positive psychology coaching can improve someone's situation, there are some really nice measurement tools to assess where they're at and then assess them further down the line to see if those interventions and the coaching has been effective. So I really like that book.
So that's your recommendation.
It is really, yes, the Blue Shoe
even
book.
though it's not explicitly coaching or exclusively coaching.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Lovely. What's next?
I thought we'd talk about cognitive behavioural coaching. We've recently done an episode on the space model, and we've got this chunky book on the bookshelf.
That's got Post-it notes and all sorts.
It's got Post-it notes.
I've dipped into that a lot over the years.
Yeah. It's probably got some notes written in it somewhere, I would imagine. And this is Cognitive Behavioural Coaching Techniques for Dummies from
That's
the
why I bought it.
Dummies range. So you've obviously made lots of notes on this and used it.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's a dip in and out one, which is the nature of that range of books anyway.
Just mention the author, Helen Whitten, isn't it?
Helen Whitten, yes.
So no, I say it's been a useful, again, not something that you're going to read cover to cover in one sitting, but something that's useful to be able to dip into and just refresh your memory on certain aspects of cognitive behavioural coaching.
And I like the Dummies range. Is that what you call it? A range of books? Yes. Yeah. Because a bit like the Blue Shoe book, it's got sort of topics within it that are quite, complete in and of themselves. You can dip in and refer to it, find an intervention or a concept or a model, something to inspire you perhaps. So I think if you're thinking, where do I go to find out more about cognitive behavioural coaching, that's a really good start.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Now, we've mentioned before, Tom, that you like Gestalt coaching.
I do, yes. So
what
my
would you recommend?
recommendation for Gestalt coaching is The Fertile Void by John Leary Joyce. So he's been around. I mean, he's a Gestalt therapist, but he's been around coaching for a long time. He's also a tango dancer.
Is he?
Yeah. So a few workshops on leadership and tango, how the two are related. So yes, yeah, lovely Irish guy, I think, and has some interesting thoughts on Gestalt. Very, very much about bringing it to life and making it accessible for coaches, because I think it can be one of those more difficult concepts to get your head around. Gestalt.
Oh yeah.
So I think for the most part, whenever we do this work on our program, we have an online module, and people come to the workshop having looked at the online module, go, "Yep, don't get that at all." And then we did the workshop, and it comes to life, and they go, "Oh yeah, no, mate,
that makes sense
I like
now."
That. But it's putting it into practice. But I think he is someone that does get across the concepts, the ideas, in quite an accessible way. So again, I like with all of these. I mean, it's not a textbook, so it is very much it's a readable book. Again, it's not a page turner, but it is. I think, unlike some of the textbooks that you've recommended, it isn't a textbook. He is telling a story and making it an interesting read.
Our next topic is transactional analysis, which can be heavy.
Yeah, and I see that you've got TA today on your your list.
In my hand, I'm waving it.
TA today. I wouldn't recommend that one. I'd kind of recommend it as a textbook if you really want to explore TA in a much deeper way, but it's quite deep. It takes a lot of working through to get to it.
To be fair, I just pulled this off the bookshelf this
Yes,
morning.
it's not actually one of our recommended reading books on our list. So I think the book that we recommend is Transactional
Analysis Coaching, Distinctive Features.
That one.
By Karen Pratt.
Yes.
Yes.
Much easier. A little book.
I thought that's what this was when I pulled it off the shelf this morning. Let's, ignore TA today.
Yeah.
Put that to one side. Transactional Analysis Coaching by Karen Pratt.
Yeah, again, just much more accessible. She doesn't go into some of the really in-depth dynamics of transactional analysis. She keeps it simple in a way that you would use it in the coaching room. So she talks about the drama triangle, parent, adult, child model, but keeps it on that quite, I don't want to say basic, but on a base compared to the rest of transactional analysis, keeps it on quite a light level, that in a way that you would use it in the coaching room. You know, we're not doing psychotherapy in the coaching room. We are using some tools from transactional analysis that are going to help our coachees. And she definitely gives some ideas as to how that might be done.
Fabulous. So there are main book recommendations for the main approaches that we cover in the Transformational Coaching Diploma and the things we've talked about on the podcasts, so that if something piques your attention, piques your interest, you could go and find out some more, or you know, come on the course. But I've got some other books that are they're not specific to a coaching approach. One book that I really loved was Maria Eilifwood's Coaching Presence, which I thought was, I know a lot of people who have read that and found it really useful to develop their own coaching presence and their own coaching style. But I also like, and I've mentioned this a couple of times before, I'm holding this book up as if you can all see it, only Tom can see it, and it's called Presence, and it's by Amy Cuddy, and it's a collation of stories, research from around the world, all about, the strapline is bringing your boldest self to your biggest challenges. And it's about developing presence, developing confidence. And what I love about that is because there's so much research in there, it can really help inform your coaching and give you some background.
Very good. My mind went to, what does strapline actually mean? What does that phrase mean? Where does that come from?
I think it comes from magazines, actually. That's where I know it from, yeah. So you've got the magazine title and then a strapline underneath.
It's a strange phrase.
I know.
Carry on.
I wasn't sure if there were some other books that you would want to recommend.
Like my book?
Well, I do have a copy of Agile Resilience, The Psychology of Developing Resilience in the Workplace in my hand. Yeah. This was written by Tom Dillon, and the series editor is Bob Thomson, who we've previously referred to.
Yes.
Tom, this is your book.
It's my book.
I love this book.
Yeah.
I have read it about 7 times.
You had to read it to edit it. Helen was my proofreader.
Yes. Yeah. I had to challenge you on a few things in there from time to time. It's a really great book about resilience. And what do you want to say about it?
Well, I don't let the title put you off. So I think a lot of medics have a bit of a reaction to the word resilience because they're told they have to be resilient in the workplace. But it's really written from the perspective of employees in a system that demands them to do more than they perhaps should be doing with less and less resources. So it's more about how you manage yourself to remain resilient for yourself despite the system.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, someone might have this in the workplace thinking that they're going to get more out of their employees. And I think some of the messaging in here is look after yourself, do less, because you can't do it all. But some really great tools.
Yeah. I think my daughter might have read it. I was talking to my daughter the other day about how she sets boundaries at work, and she's very good at setting her boundaries and not taking work home with her and all of that stuff. I thought, she must have read the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. It's not for me to plug, but thank you.
It is for me to plug. I think it's great. So, yes, we're going to put this book list on our show notes.
Yeah, and I noticed you've got Who Moved My Cheese by Dr. Spencer Johnson.
I quite like it.
It's a lovely book.
I just think it's nothing to do with coaching.
It's everything to do with coaching.
Okay, it's everything to do with coaching. We've both read Who Moved My Cheese before we met each other.
Many times.
It's got, as a strapline, an amazing way to deal with change in your work and in your life.
Yeah. And our coaching, our transformational coaching is all about change.
Yes.
So it is very much about, you're perhaps not going to use it. I think it's a good analogy for change and how we go about dealing with change.
And it's an easy read.
Yes. It's a very short book.
It's a little tiny book. But I don't know, if you're going through change and you're challenged by change in your life,
I think it's a
maybe
book
read it.
that everyone experiencing COVID should have read. Because it is very much about, and just as an example, so and this was very much in my mind as I was going through the early stages of COVID. Not that I had COVID, but that experience of lockdown and everything else. I very quickly started creating things. So a course, not the course that we now run, but a course that preceded that, and was very active in doing something to move forward because someone had moved my cheese. So the whole concept of the book is that, there's a couple of characters in it that are mice, and the cheese arrives every day, and they go and they find the cheese. They go through a maze and find the cheese at the end of the maze. And one day they arrive and the cheese isn't there anymore. And someone has moved their cheese. And they go, well, it'll be all right. We'll come back later. It'll be here. And it doesn't arrive. And they come back the next day and go, it's still not back. And then one of them goes, do you know what? I'm going to get my running shoes on. I'm going to go and find new cheese. And he goes off to find new cheese. And the other one sits there waiting for the cheese to still arrive. And that was, a great analogy for what happened during COVID.
Yeah.
And I had to find new cheese because all of my work finished. All of it all came to an end. No one had any money to spend. So I had to find new cheese.
Fabulous. And I do remember you talking about cheese quite a lot.
Ironically,
during that time.
I don't really like cheese, but as a metaphor, it was great because I'd had to go and find new cheese.
I think that's a nice one to end on.
Let's end on that one. Yeah.
Excellent.
We'll do this again. I think there are more books out there that would be not necessarily coaching books, but good books for coaches to read.
Absolutely. I think there are. We just probably don't have enough time to mention them all. But if our listeners have recommendations, we would love to hear about your books that you've read that have helped you with your coaching.
Maybe by next time we do this, I will have written my coaching book.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have one. I have an outline of the chapters for my coaching book. So I'm not going to say anymore. Don't want to give the game away.
No, absolutely. I'll tell you what you can say. What's happening on the next episode of the podcast?
Next time on the podcast, we will be interviewing one of our lovely coaching doctors, Dr. Rebecca Howie.
And Becky's lovely. She is lovely. She's been on Scottish TV recently, hasn't she?
She's a
few
star,
times. Yeah. We need to grab her before she becomes famous and ends up on Strictly, right?
Well, apparently not Strictly. That's not her thing.
Okay.
So maybe In the Jungle.
Oh.
Yeah, that's more up her street, I think. So good. So we look forward to that. So thank you for listening, and do subscribe to the podcast. Do recommend it to other people. Do send us your book tips, any questions you have for a question and answer session. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.